Just doing an update on those pepper plants that we trimmed right back, hoping that maybe those few flowers that were left on there would become peppers. Even if we only get tiny peppers, they're perfect for throwing into stir fries. So anything that we can get from plants at this time of year is very welcome. This plant, as you can see, is starting to grow new foliage on that bottom stem, but it's also got little peppers growing on it. And we've had a problem with these with aphids recently, but it's not affected fruit production. So we've got a couple of new peppers there, and then we've got one there that was less than half that size quite recently before we cut it all back. So it is putting more energy into growing fruits now. But we just keep getting these little infestations of aphids. And as I said before, they don't just go away like that. They hang on as long as they possibly can. And when you decide to overwinter your plants, if you're going to take them indoors, look back on my previous video where I show you how to make a homemade pesticide that will completely wipe aphids out. Because you need to really spray your plants a couple of times before you take them indoors. Because as soon as these plants start to warm up, that soil starts to warm up, you're going to have insects flying around in your living room, which you definitely don't want. But this one that we cut back is absolutely full of flowers, more than it had originally, which all could potentially become peppers. But apart from that, it also looks quite decorative. So I think what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to give it a good spray, just to make sure we've got rid of all those insects. And then I'm going to take this one indoors now. There's somewhere in region of about 30 flowers on that plant. So I just want to keep it warm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a bit of tomato feed, just to boost those nutrients. Let that drain through. And once I've given it another spray and left it for a few hours, I think that's going straight in house today. Because in other countries, people grow peppers as perennial houseplants. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and keep this plant going for as long as I can. Try not to let it go dormant, keep feeding it, give it a trim every now and again, and encourage these flowers to become peppers. And what I'll do with this one is, because it's quite warm in this greenhouse still, and we're still getting some sunlight, I'm going to leave it in here through the day, but at night I'm going to take it indoors so it gets that consistent temperature. And that should be enough to encourage this plant to continue growing. This plant, on the other hand, has got nothing on it. And it has had a bit of an aphid attack as well. So this one can be overwintered. And if you've never overwintered a pepper plant before, you basically butcher it. You've got to cut it right back, take everything off it, and then leave it somewhere warm and where it gets a bit of sunlight every day. If you cut it right back and pop it in a shed, it's consistently in the dark, after a couple of months it will die. If you've got a sunny area in your house, once you've sprayed it to get rid of those insects, you can take it in, allow it that bit of sunlight, only water it maybe once a week like you would an house plant, and then it will just go dormant. And next spring you'll see new growth coming on it. So rather than having to start from seeds and get tiny little seedlings that you've got to grow onto this size, you've already got a good established plant that could potentially double in size over next season. Because if it gets bigger, it's going to flower more. And we've already pruned it, but we can prune it again at the start of the season so it bushes out more. And then we'll get more flowers, meaning we'll get more fruits. So if you do decide you want to overwinter some of your peppers, there is a process that you need to go through. Because we need this plant to go dormant, not to try and grow on indoors. And we also need to make sure that we don't bring bugs into the living space, because there will be eggs laid in this soil from insects that's been around this plant through its season. You need to make sure there's no aphids on them or anything else. So when you overwinter, it's quite a drastic process that you have to do, but I'll take you through it. First thing you'll need to do is get rid of every leaf. No leaves whatsoever left on this plant. And you're going to remove branches as well. If you look at your pepper plant, you've got the main stem, which then splits off into a Y shape. So just above that, you want to be cutting off these branches. Anything that's got leaves. Any leaves that you've got on the bottoms of your stem, pinch those off, because they'll try and keep growing indoors. So if you just pinch those off, there's little ones. That bit's done. Now for the difficult bit. As I said, just there, cut that off. So you've got that part, and then the start of a fork. Same other side. Again, with that Y split, it's then split again. So just below that node, take that off. And the same other side. And I know it looks bad, but that's what you have to do. All you've got is that main stem and that Y shape. And there's nothing actually growing on this plant anymore. But that's not all you have to do. If you're taking it indoors, you need to change that compost to get rid of any egg infestations that might be in there. So we need to make sure that's clean. And we're also going to downgrade this pot size. It doesn't need to be in a 10 litre pot just to overwinter it. So to do that, we need to take it out of the pot and get rid of all that compost that's around it. So we'll carefully try and get this out of the pot. Best way you can. That wasn't too difficult. So now we need to get rid of this compost. So I'm just going to shake some off into this pot. Don't shake it with the stem because you could break it. And we're basically just freeing all these roots up. So you can see now how free all these roots are. And now that's what you're left with. But we still need to do a little bit more. Now we need to clean all these roots and get as much compost off them as possible. Just by rinsing it down with water. So then we end up with something like this. Now we've made a bit of a smaller plant, so cut away any long roots. And ideally you could make that root ball a bit cleaner than that by getting rid of as much as that old compost as possible. But rather than risk more damage and stress to this plant, what we're going to do instead is coat it with that homemade pesticide. If there's any aphids still on this plant or soft-bodied bugs, this will get rid of them before you take it indoors. Then we can repot it, but we're going to downgrade the pot size. As I said before, it doesn't need to be in a 10 litre while it's in a dormant stage. If you want to keep it in a bigger pot, that's up to you. But because we've cut the roots of this plant, we've made it so much smaller. That pot size is now perfect. So all we need to do is pop some compost in and bring it up to a height that's around about an inch just below the surface. and we'll keep it as straight as we can at the same time. Then we can just infill around it. We don't need nutrients, as I said before. We're not trying to feed this to grow fruit. We're just trying to keep the plant alive. And make sure when you do this, you properly scrub out this container, especially if it's been outside fruit season, because again, it could have eggs laying on it anywhere. There could be little bugs underneath the lips of your pots. So give it a really good clean before you transplant and take it indoors. I've also sprayed the outside of this container as well with that pesticide mix. And that's your overwintered pepper ready to go indoors. Also bear in mind that when you do this, not every plant is going to survive that process, but the majority of them should. But his main concern in doing this is to get fully established plants right at the beginning of the season. And because peppers need such a long growing season to produce fruit and ripen, this is going to give you a good head start. And all the time you've got this in your house over winter, don't give it any feed, it doesn't need it. You've just put fresh compost in there, it's already got nutrients in it. Don't use old compost, make sure it's fresh compost, or you're going to have that infestation of insects in your house. You only need to water it once a week, just a little bit, not too much. And come next spring, you'll see new shoots appearing on this plant, and it'll start to then grow into an even bushier plant because you've also cut it back. And if you do this and your plant survives, these plants can live for up to 5 years. If you want to see more content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. You all take care.